The Scharnhorst class consisted of two ships, Scharnhorst, obviously, and Gneisenau. They were named for two earlier ships from World War I, which were part of Admiral von Spee's squadron and were sunk by British battlecruisers near the Falkland Islands, after having defeated a small British force under Admiral Craddock in the Pacific. In the 1930s, Hitler managed to negotiate the Anglo-German Naval Treaty, which superseded the restrictions of Versailles and officially allowed construction of ships over 10,000 tons, which had been the old restriction, with guns up to 16 inches. Germany had just built the Deutschland-class cruisers with 11-inch guns in triple turrets, which seemed to be good commerce raiders. So the French built the Dunkirk-class battleships, although they were more like battlecruisers due to their thin armour. These had 13.5-inch guns in two quad turrets, and it was these ships that made the Germans cancel the planned D-class cruisers and build the Scharnhorst class instead. At the time, the Royal Navy tended to ignore these developments because they thought that all these ships were armed with silly little pop guns and could easily be destroyed by their existing capital ships. Previous German battleships, like the Bayern, had used 15-inch guns in twin turrets, and Hitler wanted a similar armament for the new ships. But real life is not like a tech tree where you can just unlock technology, and the ability to manufacture such guns had been lost and would take years to develop again, so they decided to use improved 11-inch guns instead. The 15-inch turrets that were developed ended up being used on the Bismarck-class battleships. Heavy secondary and anti-aircraft guns were also included, along with some torpedo launchers, because you can never have enough firepower. The Germans called these ships battleships, but the British called them battlecruisers because they were faster than most battleships, but their guns were inferior. Most battleships carried 14, 15, or 16-inch weapons. However, the hulls were heavily armoured, and after the war most people agreed that they should have been called battleships instead. Both ships were laid down in 1935, launched in 1936, and came into service in late 1938 and early 1939 respectively. At first, the ships took a lot of water over the bow when at speed, and they were refitted with the new Atlantic bow in 1939. With the outbreak of war, the Kriegsmarine tried to use these ships as commerce raiders, but all they found initially was one old merchant ship that had been converted with a few guns, mainly for show, the HMS Rawalpindi, which went down fighting but was quickly sunk with only a single minor hit to the Scharnhorst. Next, the ships took part in the invasion of Norway. This didn't start well, with an encounter with the British battlecruiser HMS Renown and its escorting destroyers, which sent them running back to safety after a brief engagement. Renown had three twin 15-inch turrets, a similar armament to that originally planned for the Scharnhorst, and if they'd been refitted, the battle probably would have gone very differently. But as the British withdrew from Norway, the ships found the carrier HMS Glorious escorted by two destroyers. Displaying excellent long-range shooting, the two German ships easily destroyed the whole force, although a British destroyer managed to score a torpedo hit on the Scharnhorst, which meant a return to port for repairs. The next year, both ships managed to break into the Atlantic to attack convoys. They found 4 convoys and managed to sink some of the merchant ships, but 2 of the convoys were escorted by battleships with 15-inch guns, which forced the Germans to withdraw. Again, they probably would have done better with their planned armament, because this would have allowed them to fight on more equal terms instead of having to run away. Once in port in occupied France, the Gneisenau was hit by torpedo bombers, and both ships were hit several times by British heavy bombers. After some repairs, they executed Operation Cerberus, forcing their way up the English Channel to reach German ports. The British completely screwed up dealing with a German fleet sailing right through their backyard. Isolated attacks by destroyers, coastal guns, and a few hopeless swordfish torpedo bombers were easily driven off or destroyed. However, both ships struck mines on the way, which meant more damage that had to be repaired once they were safely back in Germany. Unfortunately, Gneisenau was then hit badly in a bombing raid and further heavily damaged. The repairs needed were so extensive that it was decided to finally give her her 15-inch guns at the same time as part of the rebuilding work. Because of delays with this work and the changing priorities in the war, this work was never completed. She would never go to sea again and was eventually sunk as a block ship. Scharnhorst, meanwhile, had managed to make it to Norway after repairs and worked with most of the remaining German fleet to try and attack Allied convoys to Russia. She was the only heavy unit available to intercept convoy JW-55B, but ran into the escorting cruisers and withdrew after an 8-inch shell destroyed her forward radar. Still looking for the convoy, both sides ran into each other again, and although she scored some hits, the Scharnhorst tried to use its speed to head home. However, it was then intercepted by the British battleship HMS Duke of York. Under fire from the 14-inch main guns of the battleship, as well as 6 and 8-inch shells from several cruisers, the Scharnhorst made a brave stand, but she was hit repeatedly and then torpedoed by British destroyers. Her 11-inch guns just weren't up to the task of defending her from such attackers, and without her main radar she couldn't see well in the poor weather. After the ship had sunk, the British admiral in charge said, "Gentlemen, the battle against the Scharnhorst has ended in victory for us. I hope that if any of you are ever called upon to lead a ship into action against an opponent many times superior, you will command your ship as gallantly as Scharnhorst was commanded today."
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.